The whisper before the end. The room was cold. Not just the kind of cold that touched the skin, but the kind that slipped into the bones. Soft blue lights flickered along the walls of the alien chamber. Machines hummed quietly. It was too quiet, like the silence before something terrible. He sat in the center of the room, on his knees, hands tied behind his back. His face was dirty. There was blood on his temple, dried and dark. His body ached. It had been days since he slept, or maybe weeks. He didn't know anymore. But he remembered her. She stood in front of him now, tall, proud, not human. Her silver skin shimmered under the lights. Her eyes glowed faintly purple. She wore the robes of the Xalathi royal family. Noble, distant, perfect. She was the alien princess. He looked up at her. Even now, she looked like a dream. The first time they met, she wore those same robes. Back then, her eyes were softer. They would talk in secret, late hours, quiet messages, forbidden words. Now, she was silent. He coughed, the sound rough and painful. Blood touched his lips. Still, he smiled just a little. "I've always loved you," he whispered. His voice was almost gone. Dry, weak, but she heard it. She didn't move. Not at first. The room stayed quiet. No guards, no machine speaking. Just those words hanging in the air between them. For a moment, her face changed. It was small, just a twitch near her eyes. Maybe pain. Maybe something else. Her hand moved toward the small device at her belt. Not a weapon. A signal beacon. Maybe she was going to call for help. Maybe for the end. But she didn't press it. Instead, she took a step forward. "Why?" she asked. Her voice was soft, different from the voice she used in the royal halls. This voice was real. The one she used back when they laughed together in the communication chamber, when they shared old songs from Earth and ancient Salithi poems. He blinked slowly. "Because it's true." "This wasn't supposed to happen," she said. He gave a tired smile. But it did. Outside, something roared. A low rumble shook the floor. An alarm blinked red near the door. Someone had noticed. The guards would come soon. But neither of them moved. He looked at her, his eyes still full of something the galaxy had tried to crush. "Hope. You remember that night?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "You read me that story," he said. "The one about the two moons that loved each other but were always apart." Her lips parted. "I didn't think you remembered." "I remember everything," he said. "Every word. Every moment with you." She stepped closer. The air between them felt electric now. "You shouldn't have come here," she said. "You're wrong," he said. "This is exactly where I'm supposed to be." "You're going to die," she whispered. "Maybe," he said. "But not before I told you the truth." The alarm grew louder. The floor shook again. Voices echoed in the distance. Guards. Orders. Weapons charging. "You have to leave," she said. "Now." He shook his head. "Too late." "You fool," she said, her voice breaking for the first time. He smiled. "Maybe. But I'd rather be a fool who loved you than a hero who ran." Her eyes filled with something strange. Something not often seen in Salithi royalty. Tears. He had never seen her cry. Not once. Even when the High Council forced her to cut contact with him. Even when he was dragged away in chains for crimes he never committed. Even then, she had been strong. But now, she was breaking. "What do I do?" she asked, almost to herself. He looked up at her one last time. "Anything you choose," he said. "Just remember, I meant every word." And then she moved. What she did next would be remembered in secret songs and stories. Some would call it betrayal. Others would call it the beginning of peace. But whatever she did, it was unbelievable. And it all started with a whisper. First contact at the edge of nowhere. Years before the whisper, before the prison, before the war drums echoed across the stars, there was only silence. And in that silence, drifting far beyond the edge of charted space, A small human exploration ship floated toward something unknown. It was supposed to be a routine deep space survey, the kind they sent scientists on when they wanted them far from politics. The ship, Odyssey 7, carried a crew of 7. One of them was a linguist named Jonah Rail. Quiet, thoughtful, and strange in that way people become when they've seen too many things and trusted too few. Jonah didn't fit on Earth. Not anymore. Not since the day he lost his sister in the riots. Not since the governments collapsed and reformed under the new flags of the Terra Union. He didn't believe in heroes or causes or glory. He believed in words, in voices, in the things people said when they thought no one was listening. And that's why he was the first human to hear her voice. The transmission came as a whisper in the static. The crew thought it was interference or a glitch, but Jonah heard structure, rhythm, a language, something ancient and beautiful hiding in the code. He spent 3 days without sleep, decoding the patterns, mapping the sound to meaning. And then he spoke back. The voice that answered wasn't robotic. It wasn't cold. It was warm, curious, careful. She called herself a Lyra of Zalith, second daughter of the High Matriarch, born among stars, speaker of 9 tongues. She didn't say princess. Not at first. She didn't want to be that person when she spoke to him. Their messages started slow, cautious. She would send encrypted audio logs in a dialect unknown to any database. Jonah would decode them, respond with his own recordings. Over time, they stopped using translators. They began learning each other's language the old way, through patience, laughter, and mistake after mistake. Lyra laughed the first time he mispronounced her name. She called him Stone Voice because his accent was so rough. He called her Ghostlight because of how her voice shimmered in the recordings. No one else on Odyssey 7 knew. They thought Jonah was just another lonely linguist losing himself in code. And he didn't care. He looked forward to her voice more than food, more than sleep. She became the one constant in a galaxy that never stopped changing. And somewhere between the messages about art, poetry, and ancient Earth songs she found beautiful, they began to talk about fear, about duty, about the weight of expectation. She told him how her people didn't believe in love as humans did. Marriage was for alliance. Family was duty. Feelings were seen as weaknesses, not truths. Jonah told her about Earth, about how humans destroyed so much in the name of progress, but also about how they loved, deeply, wildly, even when it hurt. He told her about the day he sang to his sister in the middle of a riot, just to make her smile. She said Zalethi didn't sing. Not in public. Not since the War of the Suns, and that made her sad, though she didn't say it out loud. Weeks passed, then months. They built a bond in the dark. He never saw her face. She never saw his. It didn't matter. Then came the order from High Command. Odyssey 7 was to return to Earth. Jonah's logs had raised flags. Someone thought he was leaking data, maybe even compromising first contact protocol. They didn't understand it wasn't about secrets. It was about connection. Before he left, he sent one last message. If you ever see Earth, look for the wind chimes. We hang them on porches to call the breeze. Maybe I'll hang one for you. He didn't expect an answer. But a day before the ship jumped back to Sol System, a package appeared in the data stream. No encryption, just an old Zalethi poem. The stars will not sing for me, so I send my silence to you. Wear it, and remember I once listened to your voice. That was the last message. Until the invasion. Until the sky above Earth filled with ships bearing the sigil of Zalith. Until Jonah was taken. Until her eyes looked at him again. Not through a screen, but across the cell where he knelt in chains. And she was no longer a voice. She was the ghost light. And nothing would ever be the same. Betrayal among stars. Jonah didn't see it coming. The betrayal. The silence. The cold steel of shackles against his skin. One day, he was back on Earth, decoding peaceful transmissions, and studying ancient star maps in a quiet lab on the lunar station. The next, he was dragged from his quarters by armed soldiers who wouldn't even say why. No trial, no explanation, just the cold metal cuffs and the blindfold. And in his mind, one thought repeated like a heartbeat: what did I miss? They said he was a spy, that his private transmissions to an alien princess were not only unauthorized but dangerous. The council believed he had shared secrets, given away Earth's weaknesses, maybe even opened a door for the invasion that followed. Jonah didn't know what invasion they were talking about. He had never once sent anything that could harm anyone. But the truth didn't matter. The fear had already taken root. Humanity had seen the Xalethi ships in orbit, glowing like silent gods, and in that fear, they needed someone to blame. Jonah Rail was the easiest choice. They told him she had reported him. That Princess Alira herself had sent the transmission to the Xalethi High Command, revealing his identity and his supposed crimes. The words didn't make sense. He remembered her voice, the way she spoke to him in the dark, the way she had read him poems, told him things she had never told anyone. Was that all a lie? Was he just another fool in love with a ghost? The worst part wasn't the pain. It wasn't the isolation, the interrogations, the long hours of silence broken only by shouts. The worst part was doubt. The quiet voice in the back of his head that whispered maybe she really did betray you. Maybe you meant nothing. They moved him from Earth to a transport ship, then from the transport to a black site somewhere beyond Jupiter. He was no longer a person, just a file number. He stopped speaking. There was no one left to listen anyway. He began to dream of her voice at night, only to wake up in darkness and chains. But something didn't add up. In one of the interrogations, a guard mentioned that Alira had never appeared in court, that her testimony had come through official channels, not in person. Jonah held on to that detail. It felt like a thread, thin and fragile, but real. He began listening again, watching, waiting, and slowly the cracks began to show. He met another prisoner, an old ex-diplomat from the first wave of peace talks. She told him about the growing unrest within the Xalethi Empire. Not everyone supported the war. Not everyone believed the humans were a threat. Some believed the princess had tried to stop the conflict before it started. Some said she had been silenced. Jonah began to believe again. Not fully, not yet, but something inside him stirred. Then, one night, during a routine transfer, something went wrong. The ship carrying him shook under sudden fire. The lights died. The guards panicked. And in the chaos, a figure stepped into his cell, a tall Xalethi with dark silver armor and scars across his face. "You're the human she broke the law for," the alien said. Jonah didn't answer. He was too tired for games. "Come," the warrior said. "We don't have long. She sent me." He didn't want to believe it. Not until the door opened and he saw what was waiting. A stolen Xalethi shuttle, already primed for escape, and inside, a tiny recording device pulsing blue. He pressed play. Her voice filled the cabin. Soft, afraid, real. "Jonah, if you're hearing this, it means they found you. I'm sorry. I did what I could. But I had to make them think I was loyal. I had to protect you. Please believe me. This war, it wasn't what I wanted. I begged them to listen. They didn't. And now, they're turning on me too." He listened to it again, and again. Her voice didn't lie. She never had. She hadn't betrayed him. She had saved him, in the only way she could, by becoming the villain they wanted her to be. The shuttle jumped to hyperspace. The stars bent. The universe shifted. Jonah Rail wasn't a prisoner anymore. He was something else now. A man with a reason to fight. And far away, across the stars, in a palace filled with enemies and secrets, the alien princess waited. Not for a rescue, but for a choice. Because soon, she would have to decide. Crown or love. Empire or truth. and Jonna was coming to help her choose. Escape from the void. The stars outside the shuttle window spun like silver threads pulled tight across a dark canvas. Jonna sat in silence, hands clenched, as the small stolen craft tore through subspace. Every vibration of the hull reminded him he wasn't safe yet. Freedom wasn't freedom when the galaxy still called you a traitor, when you were only one jump ahead of death. The Xalathi warrior who'd rescued him sat at the controls, calm and quiet, his silver hands never trembling. He hadn't given his name. Said names were dangerous now. Only loyalties mattered. "She's alive," the warrior finally said. "Barely. They've stripped her of rank, locked her in the ivory vault beneath the council tower. No trial, no public word. They fear what she knows." Jonna didn't reply. He was staring at a small black recording device. The last time he heard her voice, it had been broken, full of things she hadn't said when they were still free to speak. She had risked everything, her title, her bloodline, maybe even her life, to keep him from being executed. And she had done it alone. He couldn't forgive himself for ever doubting her. "Why are you helping me?" Jonna asked. The warrior looked at him. His eyes were pale, like starlight reflecting off a blade. "Because she saved my family when the purges began. Because the council would burn half the galaxy to keep their secrets buried. Because your life matters more than they want to admit." They didn't speak again for hours. When they dropped out of hyperspace, they were in dead space, a forgotten system with no sun, no name. Only debris, broken ships from old wars, and drifting stations left to rust. The warrior guided the shuttle toward one of them, an old observation post hidden behind a shattered moon. Inside, rebels waited. Not soldiers, not assassins, just people who still believed peace between their species was possible. And all of them, everyone, owed something to Alera. They gave Jonna clean clothes, food, a place to rest. But rest didn't come. Not when he could still feel the cold of that prison cell in his bones. Not when he knew she was locked beneath her own city, surrounded by enemies, punished for trying to protect both their worlds. He walked the halls of the station at night, remembering the first time he heard her laugh. How strange and bright it had sounded, like something sacred. She had once asked him what hope felt like, and he told her it felt like standing on a mountain with the wind in your lungs. Now he felt like he was falling off that mountain with nothing to catch him but fire. The rebels were planning something, an infiltration. Dangerous. Impossible. They needed access codes, inside help, a miracle. But Jonna didn't care about the odds. If there was a way to reach her, he would take it. "You're not a fighter," the warrior told him. "You're a linguist, a scholar." "Then I'll talk my way in," Jonna said, "or I'll die trying." The plan was simple in theory, suicidal in practice. They would smuggle Jonna into the city during the Festival of Ascension, when security focused outward on crowds, not inward on vaults. A rebel tech would disguise his heat signature. The warrior would guide him through the Undercity. And once inside the council tower, Jonna would find her, or fall trying. The night before the mission, he sat alone in the docking bay, staring at a single strip of cloth Alera had once sent him. It was midnight blue, stitched with a symbol of her house, a rising star. She had said it was used in their old songs to mean rebirth. He folded it carefully and tucked it into his jacket. "You really love her," the tech whispered as she passed by. He didn't answer. There was nothing to say. Love wasn't a feeling anymore. It was a decision, a direction, a path carved through fire. When they landed on Zelith Prime, the world was alive with celebration. Towers glowed with pale light. Ships soared through painted skies. And beneath it all, in a place few ever saw, the princess waited in silence. Jonna moved like a shadow through tunnels and broken chambers, every heartbeat a countdown. The city felt strange. Beautiful, yes, but cold. Built on power and fear. The kind of place where a single voice, the wrong voice, could be swallowed whole. They reached the lower levels by dawn. And then, through a narrow gate carved from crystal, he saw her. She was sitting on the floor, her wrists bound by energy cuffs, her hair dimmed, her shoulders low. But when she looked up, when her eyes met his through the glass, she stood. No words were spoken. None were needed. And for the first time since everything fell apart, Jonah knew. This was not the end. It was the beginning. The rebellion within the prison beneath the council tower was quiet. Too quiet for a place meant to hold enemies of the state. Jonah stood there, breath caught in his chest, staring through the transparent barrier that separated him from the only person who had ever made the stars feel less empty. Alira. Even now, stripped of her royal sigil, wrapped in a simple robe of soft gray, she looked like someone carved from light and memory. She didn't speak at first, just stared at him as if he were a dream she hadn't dared imagine. He moved closer to the barrier. Her lips parted. Then the words came, soft and shaking. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," he said, voice barely above a whisper. She stepped forward, placing her hand on the glass. He matched it. For a moment, it felt like the whole galaxy had stopped spinning. Then reality came crashing back. The warrior's voice crackled in Jonah's ear, hidden behind his collar. "You have 5 minutes. The patrols are closing in. After that, I can't get you out." "I'm not leaving without her," Jonah replied quietly. "Then you'll both die here." Jonah turned back to Alira. "We're breaking you out." She didn't flinch, didn't smile, just lowered her eyes. "They'll never let me live now," she said. "Not after what I've done. You tried to stop a war. I failed. You protected me. And doomed myself." He reached into his coat and pulled out the strip of midnight blue cloth she had once sent him. He held it up, slowly, and for the first time in weeks, something shifted in her face. A small breath, a flicker of warmth. "Then let's fail together," he said. She nodded once. The warrior disabled the barrier with a stolen council key. Alarms didn't sound. The rebels had done their job, rewiring the system from the shadows. Still, every step through the corridor felt like walking across a tightrope over fire. They moved quickly, quietly, deeper into the Undercity. The rebel safe house was hidden in a collapsed transport tunnel that hadn't seen light in years. Inside, a small group waited, humans and Zalethi alike. Old soldiers, forgotten nobles, exiles who still believed in something more than control. They rose to their feet when Alira entered, heads bowed. "My lady," one said. "I'm not your lady anymore," she replied softly. "To us, you are." The room buzzed with tension. One wrong move, one wrong word, and it would all fall apart. Alira sat beside Jonah, staring at a map of the capital projected on the table. Her fingers traced the lines slowly. "They're planning to name my sister here," she said. "She's loyal. Cruel. They'll use her to keep the war alive." "Then we stop it before it begins," Jonah said. Alira looked at him. "How?" "You speak. They've silenced me. Then make them listen." Her eyes flicked to the others in the room. Warriors, thinkers, people with everything to lose. "There's one place they can't ignore me," she said. "The Hall of Union. During the rite of succession, it's public, sacred. If I stand there, if I claim my right to speak before the crowns are passed, by tradition, they must let me finish." "And what will you say?" the warrior asked. "The truth." Jonah squeezed her hand under the table. She didn't pull away. Plans were drawn, weapons distributed, disguises made. The rite of succession was set for the next dawn. They would slip Alira into the procession disguised as a member of the Silent Guard. Jonah would follow as an aide. The rebels would create a distraction just long enough for her to reach the center dais. But no plan ever survives the moment it begins. They'd made it to the chamber. The music began, slow and ancient, echoing through the golden halls where rulers had walked for generations. The crowd stood in quiet awe as the next heir approached. Alira moved through the line unnoticed, hidden beneath the tall black mask of the ceremonial guard. And then she stepped forward. Out of line, into the light. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The High Council rose to their feet, shouting. Guards moved, confused. But by law, they could not silence her yet. Not until she spoke. She lifted her mask. "My name is Alira of Zgalith," she said, "and I come not to claim the throne, but to stop a war." Chaos erupted. Some shouted for her to be removed. Others stood in stunned silence. Jonah watched from the edge of the chamber, heart pounding. "You have been told humanity is a threat," she continued. "But it is not fear that should lead us. It is truth. And the truth is, I loved one of them. And he loved me. And in that love, I saw peace." Gasps, outrage, cries for her arrest. Then a blast. The hall shook, a flash of heat and smoke. Someone had triggered a bomb. A figure in the crowd raised a weapon, pointed it toward her. Jonna ran, and took the shot meant for her. Everything went silent, and in that silence, for the first time, the galaxy saw the truth. The heart chooses war. Jonna hit the marble floor hard, the plasma bolt tearing through the side of his shoulder, burning deep into muscle and bone. The crowd scattered, some screaming, some frozen in place, and others still shouting for order. But in the center of the hall, everything slowed. The noise blurred into a dull roar, like waves crashing in another room. Alira dropped to her knees beside him, hands shaking as she pressed down on the wound. Blood soaked through his tunic, dark and thick, spilling across her fingers. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." He looked up at her, with pain flickering across his face, yet still he smiled. "Guess that buys you a few more minutes." "Don't joke," she said, voice breaking. "Don't you dare joke." He coughed, his body arching from the pain. "You're the one who stood in front of the galaxy and told them you loved me. I had to match your energy." She pressed her forehead to his for a breath. Just a second, her silver hair brushing his cheek. It wasn't royal, it wasn't rehearsed, it was human, raw, aching, and real. Around them, the hall was chaos. Security shouted. Guards pushed through the crowd. A high matriarch screamed orders. And above it all, the golden banners of the Xalathi Empire swayed like witnesses to history. But Alira didn't move. Not until she felt it. Not until something ancient stirred in her blood. A warmth, slow at first, then rising, blooming through her chest, like starlight being born. She looked down at Jonah, her heart hammering against her ribs. Something in the air changed, thickened. People around them stopped. Even the guards froze, weapons halfway drawn. It was as if time bent inward, folding space and sound into a single point. Alira stood, and the chamber dimmed. Her body pulsed with light. Not like technology, not like anything built by ships or circuits. This was something older, something sacred, a gift buried in the royal bloodline centuries ago. The starlit bond, once believed lost. Gasps spread. The council members stepped back. "It's awakening," someone whispered. "The legacy." Her voice came soft at first, then louder, then full, clear, unshakable. "I am not here to rule. I am here to remind you who we were, before fear turned us into ghosts behind gold masks, before power turned our hearts into weapons." Her eyes scanned the room, glowing like moons caught in a storm. "This man," she said, pointing to Jonah as he struggled to rise, "risked his life to save me, not for control, not for war, but for love. And that is something none of you can understand anymore." One of the generals moved toward her, hand outstretched, weapon trembling. "You don't know what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," she said. With a flick of her hand, not violent, not cruel, but certain, she sent him flying backward, weightless as dust in the wind. The chamber gasped. The high matriarch stood, mouth open in disbelief. "You've bonded with him," she said, horror creeping into her voice. You let a human into your bloodline." "No," Alira said, stepping down from the dais. "He opened the part of me that was always there, the part you taught me to hide. But I won't hide it anymore." Around the chamber, the walls pulsed with her presence, the old energy of the first queens, the legacy of those who once sang to the stars. Alira's power grew not from anger, but from truth. It filled the hall like music never written, like wind moving through a place that had forgotten how to breathe. Jonna tried to rise, pain pulling him down, but she knelt again beside him, lifted him gently, her hand glowing faintly against his wound. It wasn't enough to heal him completely, but the pain dulled. The bleeding slowed. "This isn't over," he whispered. "No," she said. "It's just beginning." Outside, crowds gathered. Rebel channels began broadcasting her speech, her face, her power. It spread across ships, across planets, across systems where humans and Salithi watched side by side. Some in shock, some in awe, and some, finally, with hope. The council tried to regain control. They tried to seal the chamber, silence the signals. But it was too late. The words were out. The light was rising. "What now?" Jonna asked, leaning into her as they walked together toward the main gates of the council hall. "Now," she said, "we rewrite everything. And if they fight us..." She looked back once, as if saying goodbye to the place she'd once called home. "Then we show them what it means when a heart chooses war, not for power, but for peace." And so they walked into the light, together. The Empire would never be the same. And neither would the stars. The unbelievable act. The stars outside the capital shimmered with strange new light. Across the Salithi Empire, from the towering crystal cities to the deep mining moons, people were no longer whispering in fear. They were speaking, loudly, across networks and transmission hubs, about what had happened in the Great Hall. The royal bloodline had awakened. The legacy thought long buried had returned, not through a chosen heir or a warlord, but through a quiet, stubborn princess who fell in love with a human and nearly died for it. Jonna and Alira moved through the empire like a storm dressed in silence. They didn't hide anymore. There was no point. Every security drone and satellite had already captured the moment she lit the council chamber with ancestral light. But none of them could catch what came next. The council fractured within days. Some of its members fled, others begged for order to be restored. But there was no order to return to, not the old kind, not the one built on fear and silence. Rebellion, once scattered, now found a face, and not just among the Salithi. On Earth, too, everything changed. The Terra Union, still recovering from years of suspicion and bloodshed, received a message from Alira herself. "We offer no surrender because we never declared war. We offer something else, truth, and a future no one has ever seen." In secret, across floating cities and hidden bases, diplomats from both sides began to gather. Unofficial talks, guarded smiles, hands once clenched in defense now reaching, unsure but willing. They called it the Ghostlight Accords, named for the woman who had broken tradition and let her feelings burn brighter than any throne. But peace was never free. The High Matriarch, shamed and furious, rallied the old guard. She called Alira a traitor, Jonna a manipulator, the humans a virus that would infect everything sacred. Her forces occupied the outer provinces. She ordered the planet Sanctum to prepare for a purification strike, a last attempt to silence the movement before it could solidify. When the rebels heard, panic followed. The purification strike was not just a threat. It was a superweapon, forbidden by treaty, capable of erasing cities, species, entire worlds. No one believed the matriarch would really use it. But Alira did. "She'd rather burn the future than share it," she said, staring out over the stars from the command deck of the stolen warship they now used as base. She always feared change more than death. Jonna stepped beside her, his shoulders still wrapped from the wound that almost ended it all. "Then we stop her." "How?" asked one of the rebel captains. "We're not an army. We're a story, an idea. Then we give them a story they'll never forget, Alara said. They didn't go in with fleets. They went alone. Jonah and Alara flew a single vessel, fast, unarmed, unshielded, directly into the heart of Sanctum's orbit. A suicide run, according to everyone watching. But it wasn't suicide. It was trust. It was the gamble only love could make. As they approached, the High Matriarch herself appeared on every screen. "This is your last chance," she said, her voice like frost. "Turn away or watch your world fall." Alara stood tall, her hands at her sides, no weapon in sight. "You taught me to fear weakness," she said. "But I've learned that love isn't weakness. It's clarity. You disgrace your blood." "No," she said. "I finally honored it." Jonah took her hand. In that moment, the ship's scanners went dark. Everything shut down. No comms, no lights, no weapons. Just silence. The matriarch had activated the weapon. But as the energy built, as the core of the planet swelled with artificial power, something impossible happened. Alara closed her eyes. The starlight within her returned, not like before, not as a glow, but as a force that bent the very rules of physics. Her heartbeat synced with the weapon's pulse. She reached not for control, but for harmony. The power flowing through the weapon began to slow, and then stop. In the orbit above Sanctum, thousands of watching ships saw it happen. The weapon faded, not exploded, powered down by something that no science could explain. A voice, a bond, a choice. It was the unbelievable act. She didn't destroy her enemy. She made her stop. The matriarch stepped down within the day. The purification device was dismantled. The High Council disbanded. And Alara, once stripped of her title, was asked to lead, not as a ruler, but as a guide for something new. She refused the throne, but offered something greater, a united charter of species. Jonah, always quiet, stayed beside her through it all. Not as a hero, not as a symbol, just as the man who once whispered love in a prison cell and never stopped believing. Years later, they vanished. Some say they returned to Earth. Others say they built a home in a forgotten system, far from politics and crowns. No one really knows. But the story remained. Children of both worlds grew up hearing it. Of the human who whispered, "I've always loved you," and the alien princess who believed him. And in that story, two empires found peace. Not through war, but through love that refused to die.